If you like Psych with Mike, here's a couple of ways that you could really help us out. You could subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at Psych with Mike. But the two things that would really, really help us out is subscribing to us on YouTube, search Psych with Mike, but also going to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a review and a comment. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.
For me to know, that's for you to know.
Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Good morning.
So, what do I know?
Which button to push? Yeah. You push mine all the time.
Yeah.
Tick me off.
Well, I didn't tell you I was going to do this, so if you're upset, then I will own it. But I actually had a therapy session with you before we started this today, and I just wanted to tell you that I heard you, and everything that you said was extremely beneficial. I hope that I can employ those strategies the way that you described them. I am going to endeavor to try.
If only I weren't retired, that would be useful in more ways.
You wouldn't let me do therapy with you when you weren't retired.
Well, no, it's unethical.
Well, in the beginning, after I had graduated and before I had started in the practice with you, even then you were hesitant to start that relationship.
And 30 years later, I'm still hesitant.
Don't make me spit my coffee. Oh, so today is Listener Request Day.
Oh, all right.
Now, one of the things that is just absolutely amazing and humbling to me is that we have any listeners at all, number one.
God knows.
Yeah. But actually, we have never done any kind of significant advertisement of this. We just kind of put it out there, and people listen to it, and the numbers of people, both on the YouTubes and on the podcast, have consistently grown. Every month there's more than the last month, which is amazing to me. But now we have gotten to the point where we don't get tons of mail. It's not like we're inundated, we can't read it all, but we get mail, and people have started to suggest topics, and so we want to be...
Once we get past all the curse words?
Yeah. And how we've ruined their lives.
Yeah.
But we want to be responsive to that, so we are doing Listener Appreciation Day or Listener Request Day. And the first couple of topics that we're going to talk about today it came from our good Australian friend, Sarah.
Sarah sent us the cutest picture. When in a previous episode, I said, we don't really know if Sarah is a real person who lives in a real country called Australia.
Yeah.
She might be Max from Tennessee.
Right.
So she heard that.
Right.
So she sent us a picture of her saying, this is how we live in Australia, and this is me sitting on the back of this big alligator.
And I've never questioned Sarah's realness or her residence, but I would point out she sent us, this person sent us a picture of a woman on an alligator.
I couldn't agree with you more. But then I'm by nature cynical and skeptical.
Right. But I believe in Sarah. But I also believe in the Easter bunnies.
Whoever she may be. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, she has valid things to say, interesting things to say.
Absolutely. Yeah. She's clearly a very learned person. And one of the things that she asked us about is this idea of victimhood and victim mentality. And that was actually even a part of what we talked about before we started recording today.
Well, we talk about people living with a victim script.
Yeah.
All of us have internalized a script that provides the basic structure of our personality and our approach to life and our interactions with other people. We internalize messages initially from our parents and our support system as young children. They give us feedback about our worth, our value, our responses to stimuli, to circumstances. They teach us through those messages, to the creation of that script, how to moderate our emotions, how to moderate our behavior. So you get a little kid who's 1 year old, and you tell him you have to go to bed or you can't have an ice cream, and he gets mad and he bites you or he hits you. As a parent, you teach that child that's an inappropriate response. If you're upset, if you're frustrated, these things are allowable. You can express them these ways. Or we teach that child, I'll break your nose, I'll hurt you, you're a bad kid. And they internalize that script. And so then later in life, that script is the underplays. It's like the background music in a movie. When the character's walking down the street and they play music, mood music to say, danger's coming. And we have that in our lives. And so if we have internalized a victim script, our script is, life is not fair, I always get screwed, no matter how hard I try, nothing ever works out for me, people always cheat me in some way, life sucks.
So for me, I would even go back further than that. I would say that Erickson's first stage of psychosocial development is trust versus mistrust, and that victim script is internalized even at that first 18 months. And pre-verbal. And that for people who are suffering from a victim script, if they are aware of it or not aware of it, but it's really, really deeply ingrained, they feel like they can't not have that as a part of their awareness. That's because it comes from that very, very early stage of development, and it's based on a sense of insecurity.
Well, and sometimes it's reinforced by families, and it's actually an extension of a familial script. Our family's always
somebody's got to have a
screwed by the man. So, or they say, "Well, what do you expect? You're stupid. What do you expect? You're ugly. What do you expect? You don't know how to do this or anything else." And you hear that over and over again. I remember being told in high school that I wasn't smart enough to go to college. I shouldn't even think about applying for college.
My high school principal told me the same thing. And Virginia Satir was one of the people that is
family
given
systems,
and talked about this idea of family identities and certain identities that are common in families. And the victim was one of those identities. The system tries to push off its anxiety onto these designated kinds of roles that people play in the family, because it allows the family to achieve balance, homeostasis. And so what happens is
that the alcoholic family script. Within the alcoholic family, there's a hero and there's a scapegoat. And so the scapegoat is like the trash can for the family,
which is essentially the victim. And that if you try and transcend that role in the family of origin is going to do 100,000, maybe even unconscious, nonverbal things to keep you in line, because if you change, that changes the homeostasis of the system. The system becomes unbalanced. So if you are aware that you have a victim script, because it's obviously easier to identify this in other people than in ourselves a lot of times, if you see that playing out in someone else, then what that means is that they're getting rewarded for that in ways that they're not consciously aware of. And so the first thing you have to do to be able to break out of that is to be willing to challenge the status quo and understand that people may see you as the bad guy if you change your behavior.
So as a clinician working with a client that comes in with that kind of a script, one of the things you need to keep in mind is that they will use this script as a reason for not trying. Why should I try? I'm not good at math. Why should I take calculus? I'll just screw it up and fail. Then my grade point average will go to hell. I won't get into college. So I'm not going to take calculus. I'm going to take underwater basket weaving.
Which was my major in graduate school.
Which is why you've done so well in scuba diving. So they use it as an excuse not to try, and they use it as a rationalization for their painful failures.
And
so it's win-win for them either way.
And if they do get to a point where their cognitive dissonance creates enough motivation to change
their success.
Exactly, they'll create opportunities to recreate the self-fulfilling prophecy and say, it's not my fault. Look, I told you this was going to happen.
Right, absolutely. So you know that clinically coming in. The client comes in, they're counting on you, they're trying to provide you with information, and they're trying to get a vent, a relief of the pain or the distress that they're feeling. And essentially what they want is for you to agree with them. Yeah, you're screwed, life sucks, bad things are going to happen to you. Oh well. And then once you give them a magical cure. But if you just use margarine instead of butter, things would be better. And they slide into a category that in therapy we call the help-rejecting complainer. The help-rejecting complainer is the most difficult type of client to work with. They suck energy out of you with their energized need for your approval and your attention and your whatever. But it literally is like plugging your iPhone into the wall. They plug into you and they pull your energy out, and they leave somewhat energized, somewhat better from the session, and leave you behind,
the therapist,
depleted. Because what they do is they seduce you in their neediness, in their attractiveness. They say, you are the most brilliant thing since sliced bread. You are the only one. I've heard about you. You're famous all over town. You're the guy that knows how to deal with this. Help me solve this problem. And so then you get infatuated with, God, I really am good. And so you say, well, you might try this. And immediately, without thinking about it or spending any time on it, they have 5 objections to why that's not the perfect solution. Really close.
Or they'll say, well, I've already tried that. It didn't work. I tried it 100 times. Didn't work. Right? So, when we're training people to go out and do therapy, that's, for me, we say all the time, don't work harder than your client. Right. You get that message. But then it's so hard. Yeah.
Because you want to help. And you think you know some things.
One of the hardest things to do, all of us, if we get into a helping profession, is because we are seduced by the compassion satisfaction. So compassion satisfaction is one of the ethereal kinds of things that gives us reward, because none of us are getting rich doing this. And
I don't know. You live pretty well.
Well, but the point is that the hardest thing to do, one of the hardest things to do as a therapist, is to accept money for what you do, because you say, oh, I should be helping people because I'm a compassionate person. And people, your clients, will even say, how can you take money for this?
My students used to come into the counseling program at the university, and I'd say, why are you in counseling? Why do you think you want to be a counselor? I'm on a mission from God. I'm Christian, and I believe I'm supposed to help all these people live better lives. And I say, oh, crap.
Well, on the other end of that, when I was in your classes in graduate school, and people would say, because in graduate school, you always have that icebreaker that first day while you're in the program. And people would say, well, I come from a dysfunctional family. And that would just drive me nuts.
Who among us?
I never heard anybody say, well, I knew my gallbladder was going to go bad and have to be removed at some point, so I went to medical school. That makes no sense, right? You can't cure yourself because you get educated.
Well, it would suggest you might have trust issues.
And if you really do think that you came from a dysfunctional family, go to therapy. Don't learn how to do therapy.
Well, but again, sidebar, a lot of people come to counseling programs to become therapists, to get therapy on the cheap. They don't want to pay for it. They want to acquire it as a process of getting their degree enough, and then have the degree that allows them to go out and earn a living.
But there's 2 things wrong with that. Number one is the tuition that you pay for a graduate degree or certificate is going to be a whole lot more expensive than going to therapy.
Yeah, but they can borrow that money.
Well, but then number 2, you can't cure yourself just because you learn stuff.
I almost said a bad word.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's amazing to me how many people, because you're absolutely right, they go to graduate school because they have this dysfunctional family. They think they're going to get an epiphany because they go. That's not going to happen.
And they have a million epiphanies. I remember teaching abnormal psych, and almost every new diagnostic category that we studied, they would say, "Oh my God, that's my sister. Oh, that's my next door neighbor. That's my boss. That's my brother." And
everything, every epiphany, every worthwhile epiphany that I've ever had about my own interpersonal nature came from therapy, not from being a therapist.
Does that include our pre-telecast conversation?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, but not only that, but to the extent that I got anything out of graduate school, and I'm not saying I didn't get anything out of it, I'm saying therapy-wise, was because the very first class of yours that I took was group therapy, and you ran that as both an educational experience and an experiential experience.
Well, we did group. Supposed to be.
Yeah. And I remember I was turning 30, and for whatever reason, I was having an existential crisis. That's the only birthday I've ever had that caused me an existential dilemma. And I really used that. I don't know how many other people in the class did, but I really used that group as an opportunity to process that. And I got epiphanies because it was therapy. Not because I didn't. Not in the education. I'm not.
It was therapeutic.
I'm not disrespecting your educational prowess, but those epiphanies didn't come from the educational part of that class. It came from the therapy part of that class. Go to therapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I
really believe
if I don't want to go, does that make me have a victim script?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I can't improve my situation. Well, no, you could go to therapy. Well, but that doesn't really work. Well, then, then you're sunk. Then what are you going to do? So here's my thing: if you're going to have a victim mentality, now obviously, most people are not consciously aware of their own victim mentality, right? I mean, if you were, but if you are insightful enough to be aware, and you're saying, I can't go to therapy, it doesn't work, it's too expensive, whatever the reasons are, then just embrace the victimhood. And don't have it be something that causes you cognitive dissonance.
Well, and that is one of the clinical responses to having a client that is a victim. Instead of constantly offering them slightly altered, encouraging avenues of progress, when they say, "Oh, that won't work. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, I tried that before. Give me something else." Instead of doing that, saying no. All I can really offer is to sit here with you in sympathy because you're screwed. Your life sucks. Our question now is, how do you get through today? How do you get through tomorrow and not make it worse?
Right.
Because this is your life. This is your script.
And
unless you're open to the possibility of writing a different script. And if you are, then we can talk about that. But if you're not, then I'll sit here all day and tell you how sorry I am that that's what's going on in your life. But you really are screwed. Yeah.
And
we can get a tattoo put up there.
A big L.
So everybody knows it.
Yeah.
No, an S. He's screwed.
Oh, well, that loser was.
But
that's that can be actually an extremely effective tool dealing with any number of clients on this.
As long as clinically you're not doing it to be manipulative.
Yeah.
You have good boundaries. You refuse to engage. They have to sit and swim in their own stew. You are offering to have that safe holding environment where they can do that and feel all those feelings in the moment,
right,
which you believe therapeutically is progressive, positive. And when they come up for air, you then can offer something.
Right.
And that's something, that offer really ought to be an encouragement. I see that you've come up for air. What could you do differently today? And you don't feed them options.
Right.
Maybe you go home by a different route. Maybe you stop at a different grocery store. Maybe you eat different foods. You don't make those suggestions. You say, come up with something, try something different.
Right, because it has to come from them.
And they say, what do you mean different? Anything different. Do something different to break the record. What do you mean? Well, I mean, what might be different? How do you get dressed in the morning? You get dressed differently. If you put your pants on first, put your shirt on first. Well, that's stupid. Okay. Then come up with something else. If you don't watch Fox, watch MSNBC. Well, that's really stupid. Well, then do something different.
Right.
But don't give them instructions, and which you cross over then in all of the alcohol treatment systems. You have to go to 4 meetings this week. You have to do step 4 again. And those have value in their place for the people that need them. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying clinically, that approach doesn't work with a victim script.
Okay, so we're going to take our break. We're running late on taking our break. And when we get back, then we'll pick this up on the other side.
All right. One of the reasons that I want to participate in this show is because it gives me an opportunity to clinically review my understanding of what therapy is and how it works, especially for the consumer. So my hope is that we will find conversations that broaden my understanding of that.
And my hope is that we do that in a way that is useful but also entertaining for people, so that they want to listen, not only because they're getting good psychology information, but because they just enjoy the show.
Easy listening with an informational twist. So
that's a new tagline.
They're not sitting there going, huh?
Easy listening with an informational twist.
I'm really good at this. I'm a professional.
You're a professional. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. So one of the things that I do with the client when we've reached that impasse is that I say, okay, let's at least try and reduce your cognitive dissonance. So your cognitive dissonance is the inability for the human mind to hold 2 conflicting thoughts comfortably. So that when those conflicting thoughts row against each other, that creates psychic energy, which we experience as anxiety. So embrace your victimhood. Stop. The conflicting thought is, I'm a victim, but I want to be different. Well, stop trying to be different. If you don't really believe that you can change, then just embrace it. At least that will reduce your anxiety.
The best victim I can be.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Which means what?
Exactly. Well, and I don't know. I'm not going to try and paint that picture for you, because I don't want to paint a picture of you being a victim. I would rather paint a picture of you being self-reliant and resilient. But if you're going to be a victim, then I want you to be the best victim you can and to embrace that, so that at least you can reduce your anxiety.
So one of the approaches might be, instead of arguing with them and being rational and evidentiary and offering alternative strategies,
which I have a want to do.
I didn't mean that personally.
No, I know, but it's true.
Is to say, let's talk about how you feel. Describe what it feels like to be victimized by fate. God hates you. That's what you believe. He screws up your life. What does that feel like? Well, what do you mean? Put words to the feelings. What are you in touch with? Can you feel? Do you feel sad?
Do you feel it in your body? Where do you feel it in your body?
Have those conversations. Or can we just sit together in the quiet and be in touch with what we're aware of? You sit there for a while and you say, what are you aware of?
Yeah, and you're really, really into that here and now, which is, a basic tenet of existentialism and
Roger.
Yeah. And
in the room.
We now call that mindfulness, but the idea of the here and now has been around since the first caveman started talking to people. And in the here and now, when you're having that conversation, what are you aware of? I would like to ask you, sitting here with me in this room today, what does that feel like? Do you feel like you're a victim when you are sitting here in this room with me? And if not, why not? What's different about what's going on here than when you go out? Because most times, in my experience, if I ask a client that question, they're going to say, no, I don't feel like a victim here.
Yeah, but I would approach it differently.
Okay.
Because you're still framing it and offering them suggestions.
Okay.
I would simply say, what are you in touch with feeling right now? Well, I don't know. Well, can you give me a word? Can you pick a word out of a list? Here's a feeling list and get 100 words.
So you're saying that what I'm do could be leading.
Yes.
Not that that's my intent, but
right.
Yeah.
And then I would also try to focus on reflective listening, and especially in the silence. Okay, so we've been silent here for 10 minutes, and let me tell you what it is I think I picked up from you. What I absorbed from you. And then you tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yeah.
So my sense has been that over the last 10 minutes, you have been breathing more deeply. Your muscles in your shoulders have relaxed. Your eyes have teared up and cleaned up twice. And so my understanding of that is that you've been struggling with waves of feeling and relaxation. Can you tell me, am I experiencing that accurately? Is that what you have been aware of? And they say yes or no, and then you go wherever the conversation goes.
Right.
But you give them reflective feedback and ask for validation.
And I just want to point out that when you said 10 minutes, everybody listening to this said, that's ridiculous. He didn't sit there for 10 minutes. And I want to emphasize, yes, you did.
For an hour.
Yeah. And people don't realize
it's really hard
the power of silence.
Yes.
And
clinically, we teach that all the time.
Right. If you are a therapist out there, one of the things that I would really strongly encourage, if you don't practice this on the regular, I would encourage you to practice incorporating silence into your work.
Well, and
don't fill the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an experiment that we used to do in class. We'd have people, especially the first night of class, in the beginning program, class of the program, have them stand within the personal space bowl, within 3 feet of distance of each other, with their hands by their sides.
Oh, I can remember.
And just stare into each other's eyes silently.
Yeah.
And then for 3 minutes, by the clock, then sit down and share with each other, not with the class, what was my awareness of you? What was my reaction to you? And give that back and forth to each other's feedback. And then explain in the class why you do that, what the process is that's going on, what they should be learning, where's the lesson here, and ask them what did they learn. And then so you start teaching counseling skills the first night.
And one of the things that I would do in conjunction with that is to say, okay, what were you aware of? And then they tell me what they were aware of. And then I say to the other person, is that accurate? And they say no.
Right.
And then I say, okay, so whatever you, the original observer, were describing is probably projective identification. You were probably describing what you feel and projecting that onto the other person. And that's the first thing that therapists have to learn not to do.
Okay, so I would use a different word instead of probably. I would say possibly.
Okay.
But I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
And I would also ask, so you spent 2 minutes explaining how you experienced Mike in this silence. Tell me what it was like for you. Tell me what it was like for you. What were you aware of about yourself? Were you nervous? Were you agitated? Did you have trouble making eye contact? Did your breathing shorten? Did it expand? What did you learn about yourself from this experience? Because one of the biggest challenges for therapists in training is to learn how to be in the presence of really strong emotional relief without trying to fix it.
Right. And the reason why this victim mentality issue is important, at least partly, is not because you experience it. I mean, obviously, if you do experience it, you probably feel badly about yourself and feel like a lot of people are not supportive of you. But the reason they're not supportive of you is because of the manifestation of that victim profile. So in the article that I'd sent you, this concept of avoiding responsibility is really difficult for people when they see someone not doing that. And they talk about...
It's not my fault I didn't read the article.
Right.
You know, the damn internet wasn't working.
Exactly.
It always happens to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you find that you know someone that does these things, if you don't think you know anybody who does these things, then you're probably the person who does these things. But things like placing blame elsewhere, making excuses, which is what you just said about, I didn't read the article because the internet was down, not taking responsibility, and most importantly, the use of the phrase, and maybe you don't say it out loud, maybe it's only in your own head, it's not my fault.
Or it's not fair.
Yeah. It's not fair is another really, really big one, right? So if you find that you think those things, or you see someone in your life who's using that kind of language, that's pretty much foundationally what we're talking about.
So conceptually, in doing therapy, one of the things that you learn to attend to is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And the use of phrases like "it's not fair" is indicative of a script. So you come to believe and know as a therapist that words matter. And so you try to help your client change their vocabulary. You don't suggest to them behavioral changes, quit your job, lose 50 pounds, but change your vocabulary, because if you change the script, your behavior will change.
So I was doing therapy. I do it all the time, but and I had this client, and she said, "Life's not fair." And I said to her,
"Amen."
I said, "Really? Because what led you to believe it's supposed to be fair?"
Albert Ellis told me.
Yeah, and she was like, "Oh no, you know what? I know life's not fair." And I said, "Okay." So, and I didn't tell her that I was going to do this, but I started counting the number of times that she said life's not fair. After she had said, "No, I don't think life is fair."
I misspoke, right?
Yeah, and at the end of the session, I said, "Could I tell you something?" And she said, "Sure." And I said, "I would like to tell you how many times you said that's not fair after you admitted that you knew life was not fair." And she said, "How many?" I said, 16. She said, "No, I didn't." Okay.
It's not fair that you kept count.
Yeah. And, that's something that can be really, really powerful for people. You had given me some really, really salient sage advice earlier that my tendency is to want to explain things by drawing a logical argument, kind of Socratically based on, Socrates' original Socratic method. If you agree with two of my premises, then whatever my conclusion is must also be true.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that can be really powerful, but it can also cause people to rear up and be defensive. And you were saying to me, what if you could just say, "I want to be in your presence, and I just want to be with you and see what happens." And I think that is really, really powerful advice, is that even in our own lives, silence can be very important, but just being in the presence of another person without trying to be judgmental.
Supportive silence.
Yeah.
Yeah, not aggressive silence. There's a difference.
Okay, yeah. But in that way, if you have somebody in your life that demonstrates this tendency to be a victim, and your go-to is to say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, put on your big boy pants, act right, that's probably not helpful to that person.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I remember suggesting to couples that were struggling, can you, by the clock, set an alarm on your watch, whatever you need to do, get within 3 feet of each other, not touch each other, and just stare into each other's eyes? Can you do that? And can you do it and be aware? You do it for a minute before you break away or make a joke or do something stupid or move or have to physically touch. But can you just be in the presence inside that space and be intimately available? And if you have some success, can you expand the time frame? So just work on that. And if you give assignments, that's a good assignment.
And see what
comes.
Yeah.
What the resistance is, what the avoidance is, or what the outcome is.
Well, and that's a good point. Now you're leading me down another tangent. But this idea of see what the resistance is, see what is causing you to not feel comfortable doing that. But that takes courage.
Yeah. And honesty.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it because I'm mad at him. I'm so mad at him I couldn't stare in his eyes. Okay. Let's talk about why you're mad.
And it might not even be I'm mad at him right now. I might be resentful.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
Yeah.
Do that process.
Yeah. Okay, hopefully that was beneficial for people. And again, today, our whole entire recording schedule is listener suggestions. So please, if you have any questions or comments or something that you would like to hear us talk about, send those into psychwithmike.com. You can also catch us on the Facebook at Psych with Mike, on Twitter at Psych with Mike, on TikTok at Psych with Mike. And as always, the music that is in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.